Hey John, how you been?
Good, good. It's been a while, and the world changes as everything else maybe stands still. But there's a lot of movement in the market, one way or the other. Things have changed since day one of this podcast and of our group. So it continues to evolve, and you know I think it's a good lesson over time, that it doesn't always go the way you think it's going to go. And you need to be prepared for that. And so, we are where we are right now. And so really the question is where do we go from here?
Yeah, so let's talk about where we are. I mean, the last podcast we did was quite a while ago. In the time since we recorded our podcast, I actually now am a dad. So I took some
Yeah.
time off of work and spent some time with my son. And I got to tell you, that's a great way to realign your priorities. And I think people in this industry are having their priorities realigned, whether they want them to be or not. Luckily for me, I was able to take the time to be with my family, have an extended parental leave, which is wonderful. If you're able to work at a firm that's able to support that, I think you should take full advantage of it. And during that time, I thought a lot about how far this industry has changed. How many of my friends, just anecdotally, I'll share on the podcast here, I have heard of who have told me that they are getting burned out of crypto, looking to
Mhm.
transition into a different thing, whether it be AI or compliance or some other type of SaaS business. I have friends who are burned out of crypto, and I have friends who are looking to not just, either they got laid off by many different firms across the crypto space. Just found out about two new friends that I have that have unfortunately been laid off. Um, it's can be rough out there, and like we were saying at the beginning, you know, where are we from where we were previously? It's radically different. And so what I was thinking we could talk about is, why all the uncertainty still? How far are we away from that mass adoption moment that we're kind of hoping for with TradFi to DeFi? And right now, um, should we be focusing more on TradFi than DeFi? I mean, this is one of the ideas I've been playing around with. I mean, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that, John?
Well, I don't know if it is focusing on TradFi as much as knowing that what happens there has a huge impact on crypto because we're wondering, we're musing about, where are we and how did we get here over the past maybe, and I'm not even talking about all the FTX and all the corrupt things that happened. We're just talking about the market. And there's two things that have to me have really changed the landscape, and it's being affected by people that that are being laid off. Number one, interest rates have uh, you know crypto grew up in a zero interest rate environment and got its legs and got its
It's never
audience,
seen a high rate environment.
and I think the predictions people made were that that was going to continue, and we're seeing that it didn't continue, and we're seeing where we're at, which is basically just treading water. Really,
Mm,
is where that would be the best analogy I would have for the crypto. It's treading water.
hmm.
Sometimes it goes down and takes a gulp of water, and sometimes it pops up for some fresh air. Uh, but that's one of the things is interest rates dictate everything. When projects are getting their money from financial institutions that now have to pay an order of magnitude or three greater than they used to on a percentage basis for money, it's amazing. It anybody that works in finance knows that that's rules the day. I mean, when you have to borrow money and it's more expensive, you're very selective for how you invest, or you don't invest at all. Which is another thing. So interest rates is one thing. The other thing, obviously, that's lurking around is is government intervention, if you want to call it regulation, the SEC approving EFTs or not approving EFTs for Bitcoin and Ethereum, has got things people are really focusing on that. But guess what? It's largely out of everybody's control. There's not
Yeah,
much you can do about it. So I think those things set an environment for where people are really can get burned out, can get really nervous, can pull back, can don't want to engage in the market, and you
mm,
cannot blame people for that. That's what happens, and I know that at least at the beginning of the downturn, it's like, well, in a bear market, builders still build, and they do until they can't get funding,
that's
and
right.
that's what happens. You can build all you
Yes.
want to, but if you're not being paid, you're going to find some way else to make a living. I mean, it's just
So
the way it is.
So let's talk about both of those items. So anecdotally, you mentioned interest rates. So I've two stories to share with the group when I realized that this was a real serious influence on people's behavior. Naturally, we all are aware of the fact that when rates go up, the economy constricts. But what's interesting is how it influences investor behavior of people who normally I would never expect it to motivate. So one example is my friend, who I would consider to be the most degen person I know. This is a guy who's chased after the most high APY opportunities in DeFi, flips NFTs, completely subsumed by Web3, right? I was shocked one day when he told me that he had just bought a bunch of T-bills. And this is a guy who would never touch T-bills his entire life because he's, a little older than I am, but, close in age. And he's grown up in this low interest rate environment. And so to hear him say that he bought the most boring investment class was shocking to me. But then I realized something. It's like, well, duh, hang on a second. Why risk your capital into a smart contract risk, highly uncertain, volatile, new economic paradigm when you could have an investment that's backed by the full faith and credit of the world's largest and most powerful military? I mean, that trade-off, you get the same yield, 5% plus in T-bills at that time when he was buying them, versus, yields were compressing in DeFi at that point. Yields were not that
Right.
great for even, some of the more riskier pools. And
Well,
so
let me hold you off there because I thought you were talking about myself because
you
I'm
are one of
six,
my more degen friends, yes.
I'm 62 years old, and this year is the first time I've ever bought a T-bill in my life. Okay, and
That
I
should
did the
tell
same
that should
thing.
tell
I'm
folks
going
something.
5.3, 5.4%, as safe as it, risk-free return as it gets. Why am I putting any of my traditional portfolio in anything else? Well, I mean, it's not all in T-bills, but I mean, I took a considerable amount of money off the board and put it into
Yes.
T-bills.
I mean,
And it's just,
have you seen the meme? It's called the mid curve meme. It shows an IQ distribution and
right.
it's a bell curve. And
Hmm.
it shows really, really high smart people on the far right side and really, really, really dumb people on the far left side. And this is an example where you want to mid curve this. Just stick it in T bills. Don't try to be super, super smart
Hmm.
and do some highly leveraged DeFi position that you have to think about like more than 10 minutes. Or
Hmm.
don't do something really, really stupid and just throw it all in Pepe. You should instead just mid curve it, just go right down the middle, do something safe, TradFi T bills. Why not?
Right. Well, and that just it finally dawned on me because it's been so long since those paid anything, that was attractive. And then now it's like, okay, 5% sounds pretty good.
And you think back to when the interest rates were really low and people were moving into crypto, they were frustrated with their existing bank accounts only paying, 10 bips, like
Yeah,
sub 1% yield. And now you're actually starting to see banks offer yield in more traditional demand deposit style accounts.
sure.
There's a variety of neobanks, of course, offering even better rates like Fierce and a few others that I've heard of. But there's these banks that are now saying, you know what, actually, we can afford to share some of this yield with our customers, which is amazing. So if you think about it, people were pushed out of banking because of low yields, and now they're being brought back into banking because of the higher yields.
Right. And that's the evolution of the market. Again, people, an entire generation has grown up in this zero interest rate market, and it never dawned on them what a what high interest rates would do to the market or
Hmm.
crypto, because crypto's never existed in this type of market. So it's You know, I think it's a teachable moment for everybody that don't expect things to continue on forever the way they are. So
Yeah. And it's a good reminder to not get caught down the rabbit hole of crypto and lose sight of the macro environment. I think that's something we've tried to instill in this podcast from the
right,
first day, which is that, you know, coming into crypto, there's a lot of really cool innovation, but you don't want to get out over your skis and not recognize the fact that 2008 was when the Bitcoin white paper first came out. And, recall after 2008, interest rates were driven to their lowest extremes in an effort to get the economy back on its legs. And so we've never seen rates as high as they are now. A second anecdote to give you after my DGen friend bought T-bills, just personally where I live, I've noticed that the real estate market has seemed to slow down. Houses are being listed for longer. They're not going as quickly as they were previously. And the inventory seems to be going down, just anecdotally what I've noticed around the area. And if you think about it, logically, it makes a lot of sense. Who's looking to sell a home and then move immediately into a new home where, let's say, their old interest rate was maybe 3% or 2% if you're lucky? They were paying 2% on a mortgage, really affordable mortgage rate. But now to move into a new home, presumably they might have to finance it. They're looking at 7-8% interest rates. And so their cost of their mortgage, quadruples in some cases. I mean, this is something that has really ground to a halt in some areas. I think the real estate market is freezing at the moment. At least, geographies are all different. You can find a pocket where it's really hot. I totally get that. It's a highly localized sort of thing. However, I'm just saying where I am. I think I've noticed this. And it makes sense. Unless you're a cash buyer, you're not really looking to finance a house right now.
you're not really looking to finance anything. Same things
Yes,
happen with the car market. I mean,
correct.
it's rough. I mean, and just as an anecdote again from being an old guy, the first car I bought a Nissan pickup truck when I got out of the military, and the interest rate was, I don't know, 15 or 16% on the car, and I was naive and young and I didn't understand finance because I hadn't even gone to college at that point. And then the first house I bought in 1990, maybe 89, I think, somewhere around there, interest rates had come down all the way to 10.5% on a 30-year mortgage.
Wow.
And over the period of time as I owned houses and I end up paying my mortgage off, is as that came down, that freed up a lot of cash every time refinance from 10.5 down to 8.5 or 7.5.
Mm.
And then again, when it comes down even further, you reinvest, you refinance. I keep saying reinvest. At maybe 5, or I think 4.5 is when was the lowest rate I got. But that
Mm.
shows you. And instead of taking the cash, and this is basically meaningless. Instead of taking the cash, I just cut the term down because I basically kept my payment the same, and I just cut the 30 down to a 15, down to a 10, and then it was paid off.
Wow.
You know, so this will return someday, but we're looking at the exact opposite now, where it's like
Mm. Yes.
crazy. And another anecdote from, I don't want to get too far afield, but in the real estate market back in the 80s, when the interest rates were very high, they kept going up, and they kept going up so fast, people were buying. There was a buying panic because they were buying because they knew the rates were going to go up even higher, so they
Hmm.
bought it 12%, 13%, because they knew it was going to keep going. And that it
And
just
that reminds me of a phenomenon during, post-COVID. I know there was a massive housing boom. I mean, people were buying houses sight unseen.
right.
And even when my wife and I bought our home, we felt like we had to make an offer above
Yeah.
asking, and
Yes.
we had to compete with 28 other offers.
Mhm.
Luckily, we got our home. And the joke is like, everybody's, commenting on like Instagram and social media with this similar comment. They say, oh, I didn't realize that my starter home, which I got at a 3% interest rate, is now my forever home because I can't now buy a new home and at 8%. And
Right.
I can somewhat relate to that. Although
Yep.
so we're in a new paradigm for a lot of people who are younger and who are not used to seeing a different environment like this. And that kind of leads to the second part, which is, the interest rates by far, I think, have the most impact. Even the regulatory intervention and meddling, whatever you want to call it, I think that only has a certain impact to an extent. But we are at this phase now where it has felt like the walls have been closing in around crypto in a handful of ways. The big elephant in the room is the Silvergate signature collapse, which also was interest rate driven due to some mismanagement of their long dated positions. The interest rates are one thing, but then the regulators see blood in the water, and then they, take action. So there's been a handful of things that I think are not necessarily new news, but I think that they're kind of helpful to understand the framework through which the SEC and a variety of other regulators are viewing the space. And we'll share it in the show notes, but there was an article that I read that I thought was really good. It was about, it was featured in CoinDesk. It was called "Congress, Not the SEC, Should Set U.S. Digital Asset Policy." And I know I shared this article with you, John. Policy and regulatory stuff has always been very interesting for this, our group, because it influences how the public can become comfortable with the space, knowing that there's police in force to protect and make sure that markets are fair and orderly. And so that is the mandate of the SEC. It's to, support capital formation, maintain a fair and orderly market, and then, bring enforcement actions against those who don't abide by law that is passed. However, the opinion of this piece is that the SEC is, putting their thumb on the scale and doing things a little differently. So there were three things that I felt were interesting about that. The first was this custody rule, which has prevented banks from being custodians of crypto. And it's called SAB 121. And it's sort of an obscure guidance that's given to banks. But essentially what it says is that if you're going to hold crypto for the benefit of your customer, you must treat it as an asset on your own balance sheet, which creates massive problems from a liquidity perspective for the bank, because depending on how that asset is risk weighted based on a variety of different metrics, the bank must sometimes keep the same amount of cash on hand to support that crypto, or sometimes a multiple of that value. So if you have $10,000 of Bitcoin on the platform, you must also have $10,000 worth of cash in your bank. And so in some cases, banks can't afford that. They can't manage to do that. It makes them illiquid. And so one of the things that this guidance has done is it's spooked banks away from being custodians, which in my view does the opposite of what the SEC would want, which is to help regulated entities help others get comfortable with holding their crypto. I'll give you just one example of this. When you have a company like an exchange, let's just say a Kraken or a Coinbase, unless those assets are held in one of their trust vehicles like Coinbase Trust or another trust entity, your assets are held by a business that is a licensed money transmitter, money service business, but does not offer a trust charter to protect those assets. And so in the event of something like FTX, you know that when your funds are held with FTX has gone bankrupt, you have very little chance of getting those assets back. And you get in line behind the other creditors when the bankruptcy estate finally settles cents on the dollar to you. So we're witnessing this play out right now with FTX. Now, had FTX been a trust chartered entity with perhaps bank custodians, there'd be more significant statutory protections that would allow customers to say, hey, actually, these funds were mine, that were held for my benefit. So I know there's a lot of detail here, but really I bring up this point only to point out that by making these obscure requirements for banks and custodians to not support this asset class, you actually make the industry less safe.
Right. And I think that's due to not fully understanding, or I don't know why they do that, and I think it just brings a lot of suspicion, I would say, on the SEC and how they operate, because, they're getting back to our basic civics class in American government and the way it's structured and constitutionally how it's supposed to work is Congress writes the laws, the executive branch makes sure they're followed and enforces them. But the SEC, because Congress can't be that minute on details, they can't write laws for every specific instance. It's fairly broad what they write, but they give the SEC free rein to kind of interpret a little bit, and they go way beyond the interpretation. They just make up their own rules. I
Mm.
mean,
And
there's no way. Well, I may be wrong because I'm not an expert, but I mean, how do you go? Well, one day Ethereum is a security and Bitcoin's not, and you make these arbitrary comments or decisions, but based on what? Well, there's
mhm.
these obscure, very old laws on the books that we're interpreting, and really a responsible SEC should say, hold on, this is a new asset class. We need to kind of push all those old financial rules aside and make this a new industry and appropriate rules for it, but they're not doing that. They have, and it's almost as though they don't have any interest in doing that, and it's kind of sad to see that. But and not to belabor the point, but that happens in many branches of government or industries that are controlled or regulated by the government. They do that, and it's like, this isn't the way it was supposed to work,
Hmm.
and many times it is counterproductive and harmful to the industry, and they're just like, well, we were just following the law the way we
Hmm.
saw it was supposed to be, and it's like, but we don't allow the police force to do that. We only allow them to enforce the laws that are on the books. They can't go, well, I think the way I interpreted burglary is, this, and therefore, they
Correct.
can do that, but they can get in a lot of trouble, and they can't write their own laws or interpret them in all these different situations because it's
That's
just
a great analogy. And the analogy is very potent in this case because you pointed out that the incumbent regulator who is most familiar with the complexities of the industry that they regulate has a home field advantage versus Congress, which has a broader mandate. And so
right.
you're exactly right that there is a gap of knowledge between this body and this body. And so when the regulators have this home field advantage and understand the nuances of the law in particular, they can lean in certain directions and say, well, look, this is the way the wind is blowing. However, their mandate is not to set law. And just like you said, a policeman can't just make up a rule and a law that doesn't exist. He has to abide by the existing laws. And, in the case of like a warrant, you need to have a warrant to have a reasonable, to have a search and seizure of somebody's property because of your Fourth Amendment rights. It's the same thing. You need to have Congress, which passes the laws. Then you have a court system which interprets the laws, and then you have the regulator which helps you enforce them. And so they need to enforce what's on the books. And so that is, I think, just a very well said point from you, John. That the police force is different than the ones that give them authority and set the rules. Which leads to kind of the second point that I wanted to point out from this article, which was the custodian rule. So a while back we covered it. The proposed changes to the custody rule for investment advisors was we felt a pretty good development in some ways because it's sort of recognizing a way in which qualified custodians can support the digital asset industry. However, what they had done was they wanted to define qualified custodians to be only banks to be the
Right.
custodians for investments for investment advisors. If you think back to my earlier comments about banks having trouble custodying crypto due to the capital treatment on their balance sheet, these two laws are in conflict with one another, or these two recommendations are in conflict with one another. And the bigger point is that it would actually ice out some of the state charter frameworks, which have been massively successful to date. So I can think of Paxos, I can think of Gemini Trust, I can think of Coinbase Trust, I can think of, Anchorage is the only one that has this OCC charter that's a unique sort of offering in its space. There's nothing quite like it. So the SEC once again has done this sort of move that ends up ultimately icing out a very significant portion of custodians who are already in business today serving the industry, offering statutory protections for their customers. And so my question once again is kind of like what gives? This sort of action really does more to harm and endanger the industry and make it more risky for people like Elizabeth Warren, who claim that it's filled with all sorts of bad actors. Well, you have perfectly valid and above board actors who are trying to make the space safe, and you're essentially opposing them.
Right. And that's the politics of crypto and just politics in general, and it's kind of commentary of where we are right now in this country, I guess, to some extent. Um, but yeah, it's sad, and I think the way that impacts the industry is everybody's just kind of taking a wait and see approach. What is this actually going to look like when they're done with whatever they're doing? As an investor, if you don't have confidence in the market that you're investing in and you think it's going to be changed drastically, or an asset that you're interested in is all of a sudden going to be unavailable or something like that, that it keeps money on the sidelines. And kind of going back to the TradFi, you know, understanding of markets, which crypto can really learn from, I think sometimes is, you know, we see it in crypto. There's a rotation from stable coins to other types of interest or yield generating uh, projects, and it rotates. And we're kind of in stable coins right now because we don't know
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen, or here's really good yield, we're going to move some of our money. There's a rotation of money that's happened in crypto. We've seen it for the last couple of years. Well, this sector gets hot, maybe NFTs get hot, this stable coins is the new buzzword that gets hot, and but industry, crypto is its own industry, and industries, the investors rotate their money across industries, in and out of industries. And, when they leave, it doesn't leave much there. Whether you're, maybe it's a down market for the energy market and there's a couple slow years. Nobody's investing in energy. They're going into high tech, or vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. Or, there's a rotation in the industry of where people put their monetary bets. And it's not a a critique of crypto. It's just the reality of markets that I think people have to be aware of. It's not, that's just that's a dead market, it's never going to come back. Well,
Yeah.
they've said that about the oil industry I don't know how many times, right? And it's still hot as it always is, or it comes and goes. But it's not common on the underlying industry. It's just how money rotates as the economy changes, as interest rates changes. And I think we're feeling that, but I don't think people are focusing on it and actually realize that. Because if they realize that, it gives them a little bit more comfort, and they can just kind of, you can sit on your hands for a while. Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
It'll come back.
So, John, given all of the stuff that we've talked about, what would be the best investment that you could make right now, given all of the things that we've discussed?
Right. The best thing to invest in is yourself at this time, and a little more education, a little broader knowledge of markets. Really take the time to learn as deeply as you can, deeply and broadly, actually, both at the same time if you can. I know that's a little contradictory, but don't leave any stones unturned, and really focus on yourself and what you really do know. If there's some gaps in your knowledge, go for it. If you don't understand finance maybe as well as a finance guy because you've only been in crypto, and study, learn, follow people that are, as they always say, people smarter than you, associate with them, and it's not a knock on you. It's just reality, what you need to do to get smarter and better.
And that was the only reason that I was able to even make it into this industry, was that I found a lot of people who were smarter than me, and I brought them together with TradFi to DeFi. And I said, look, ultimately I'm wanting to learn myself, but I think we can all benefit from sharing information. And that's ultimately what we tried to create here. So I would agree that the investment in yourself is by far the best investment you can make. And we'll be releasing an article shortly kind of talking about that. And when I look at our own content over the last several years, the best performing stuff has been personal investment stuff of self knowledge and personal and professional development. Some of our most popular podcasts was the one we did with Taylor about becoming a Solidity developer. One of my episodes about just how to get a job in crypto. And like you said, right now, we should be looking at TradFi. We should be figuring out, you should be positioning yourself accordingly, not just in one silo of information. Broaden your horizons a little bit. And I can think of in my own work, I've really begun developing my own knowledge of just the payments industry in particular. Where historically I had been focusing almost exclusively on the crypto industry, I'm now developing my knowledge around payments infrastructure. And so this is all helpful information for as the industry grows and matures. Crypto will need safe and secure fiat rails in order to operate and bring crypto to the masses. And so when you have these opportunities, like you were saying, to sit on your hands from an investment perspective, that doesn't mean the investment has to stop. The investment can continue here
Right.
because any move that you make that benefits yourself is naturally going to pay off dividends in the future.
Right. And I think this is a good time for the crypto industry for one reason, and maybe if they follow my advice, I don't know. But as long as I've been in the industry, and there's always this, there are crypto people and then there are non-crypto people. And crypto people are highly, highly resistant to somebody criticizing cryptocurrency. They just completely, nah, I'm not even going to listen to what you have to say. If you're negative about the industry, don't hear what you have to say. Well, you know what? Some of those people are pretty smart and they can point out weaknesses about the industry that you better know what they are. And I think we're kind of seeing that a little bit. It's like it's not this invincible, all encompassing thing that's going to fix everything in the world. Maybe one day it will. But, take some of those criticisms, just like in anything else. Take a criticism and take it apart and know it and maybe apply it and maybe you can get some knowledge out of that. It's like, well, I never thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
I know a
I
lot
think a
of people.
huge
Yeah,
lesson is this whole FTX crash, Terra Luna, Three Arrows Capital. These are all bad actors,
right,
fraudulent organizations that
right,
did terrible things to harm our industry. We should be calling that out and not let that back into this industry. If you think about
right,
it, this industry took a massive black eye, and in the eye of the public, maybe it doesn't deserve significant amounts of capital flowing in, because why would you trust people like SBF and FTX to secure your crypto safely? It
right,
is not unimaginable to understand why the skepticism of crypto exists today. The
right,
industry has been set back. And so let's internalize those lessons. Let's build better organizations that don't allow for that kind of chicanery.
right. Absolutely. And that's really what needs to happen is and I've always said this, there has to be a coming of age and a maturing of the industry of, okay, we really have to be. I know people are serious and they take this the wrong way, but the industry is, still, learning how to walk, and we're a ways from being mature enough to be able to really offer the things that we want it to offer and fight all those fights and get all these problems out of the way and security and corruption and which every industry, especially industries full of money, it attracts bad actors. That's just the way it is. That's just the
Mm-hmm.
way it is. When the government gives away trillions of dollars, there's people there using it in the wrong way and stealing it and misappropriating it because it's just this tidal wave of money. And literally, for a while in crypto, it was a tidal wave of money that came into the industry. And some people got famously or infamously wealthy from it. And so we have to, be a little bit more mature about how we approach that in the future, I think.
I agree. So, John, what we'll do with our microphone is we're going to spend some time helping our audience invest in themselves. And so, this will be things like interviews with people, like a day in the life of a SDR, or a day in the life of a particular type of industry or individual in a certain role. How to get a job in Solidity, how to do things in the industry, and how to consider things outside of it. We want to increase the relevance of the information that we're sharing. So, to our audience, be on the lookout for that. And any last concluding thoughts, John, that you'd like to share?
No, alls I can say, Tyler, it's good to get back to what we did a while back, and and to take a fresh look at the industry, and in the end, what we always wanted to do from day one is to help other people, and if we do that, we're going to be successful, regardless of whether it's monetarily or how many clicks or social media or video views. Is that if we're helping people, that's all that really matters in the end.
Absolutely. I think the most rewarding conversations I have with our community are the ones where somebody says to me, thanks to that introduction you made for me, I now have this job in this industry, or thanks for introducing me to this person, and thank you for helping me understand X, Y, and Z because that helped me write this piece that then got seen by this other person. Those are the metrics that I care about. At the end of the
Right.
day, I don't care if this has 10 listens or 10 hundred. I'm going to be very happy if my friends tell me that I helped them in some way. And I know
Right.
that you feel the same way, John. So, to everybody listening, I hope that you can take that away from this call. We're really excited to do that with you. And if you have ideas of where we can help you, let us know. And if you have ideas that you'd like to contribute to the community, we're open as well. We'd love to hear from you. So, thanks again, John. Great to catch up. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Awesome.